Hi, Shalja. Welcome to Loudspeaker.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm delighted and honored.
So, Shalja is the executive director at narika.org and a domestic violence advocate. So, she has always been very, very active in social causes and social work. And I got to know about her through a friend of mine back in India. And over the last 12 to 14 years, I've kind of seen her social presence. And through her social presence, I've seen the amazing work that she's done. She was active, and I'm sure you're still very active in your community. But this is something that seems very, very serious, and that seems very, very meaningful. And I'm sure it is changing a lot of lives. So, Shalja, quickly tell our listeners, what do you do at Narika? And then just take us through your life in India and how did you come to
Well, thank you for this space to share about my work and my journey. So, to answer your first question, Narika is a nonprofit based in California in the Bay Area that provides culturally responsive services to survivors of domestic violence, which means we are largely serving survivors who are coming from the South Asian diaspora. They have linguistic needs, they have cultural needs, and that's what we try to meet. I'm the executive director here for the past 2.5 years. But my journey with Narika started almost 10 or 12 years ago when I first trained to be a volunteer. I took their advocate training, and then I felt like this was my calling. So I've kind of been in the movement for a long time, thanks to the training that Narika had given. And then I think you wanted me to talk about how I got to the US. There's nothing spectacular about it. Came the usual route that most of my peers and colleagues over here have came for mass communications, though. Most of our peers come for tech, so kind of a little bit of an outlier. It's been an uneventful arc in some ways and a very, very eventful arc in many ways.
so the eventful arc or the eventful journey matters a lot, and that is why you're here on this channel. Were you always drawn to social causes since you were little, or was there something that always drew you towards these community causes, social causes, or helping others?
Yeah,
How
well,
did the interest start?
how did the fire get lit? I cannot remember I don't have a single living memory when I don't have the perspective of doing something in the community. But it has never seemed to me as community work or social work. It was a way of life. And I think I would like to thank my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, my dadi. I grew up in Delhi, living with her and my aunt. Both of them were, path breakers in their ways, very fierce freedom fighters, always engaged with the community, but never from the lens of this is social work or helping somebody. They just were very civically engaged women, very, very much focused on education, empowerment, speaking your mind, being able to differentiate right from wrong with context. So I think it's just always been a way of life. For me, there was no other way to be honest. And I really thank them for the role models they've been.
Oh, that's nice. I think when we are little, the people we are surrounded with, especially our family members, they have
Yes.
a huge influence on us.
Yeah.
Were they also involved in organizations or professional services or something that was more concrete, or were they only helping people as individuals?
As far as I remember and know, I think their most organized involvement was with the freedom movement. They were part of the Gandhi ashram and they did a lot of work there. And they were pathbreakers in terms of, the things they chose to do even in their profession. Like my grandmother was a PhD and wrote about women in Sanskrit dramas and, raising their voices. My aunt was a psychologist and she was forever kind of asking what are the norms that we are perpetuating generationally, and what is it that we take as the standard norm truth in our communities and how do we change that. So I think it was woven into their profession, and I think that's kind of how I have grown up too. I don't differentiate a lot between this is the professional life and this is my communal life. The passion just runs both ways. So a lot of women came to our community, our home. A lot of families came to our home. That was like the door being open and somebody coming for support was just a natural thing. It wasn't, there was no sense of, I think what I really loved the most was there was no sense of charity or giving or I'm helping someone. It's really solidarity, and we take the support when we need it and we share the support when we can give it.
Especially in that age and era when there were not too much support for women. Were there also male influencers in your life? Because domestic violence is mostly related to men. So
Mhm.
were there men in your life that made you see that men can also be soft, men can also be uh, like they can have some kind of feminine qualities, and maybe that kind of gave you a feeling that this is not right what women go through.
Um, so yes and no. So first of all, domestic violence does happen between all genders. It's not only from men to women. It is surprising for folks to know that it does happen from women to men. It can happen between same gendered couples. But yes, the brunt of it and the impact of it is experienced by women most, and how deep the impact is also is profound on women and children and generational families as a result. In terms of role models who were male, I can for sure say that growing up in Delhi, I have many, many experiences with men violating the boundary, whether sexually, physically, emotionally, verbally. That definitely told me that this is not right. I will say that the men in my home, they all, I think, carried a certain level of respect, and our home was ruled by matriarchs. I mean, that's what my norm is, that the home is a matriarchal home. We actually have roots in Kerala, which draws some of the deepest, oldest feminist matriarchal traditions in India come from there. So I do think that our household was heavily influenced by the matriarchs. It's always the matriarchs who run it, so I think that with what I was seeing outside, which was very different, where there was abuse, there was molestation, there was catcalling. I mean, growing up in Delhi, which is now called the rape capital of India, it wasn't easy.
I stayed in Delhi. I lived in Delhi for a few years. It was rampant, every nook and corner.
Yeah.
It was horrible. I don't know how the situation is right now, even though Delhi is called the rape capital of the world.
Yes,
Things
I
will change,
definitely,
and
yeah,
things are
I've seen,
changing.
but it's when I came actually to the US and I stopped experiencing the violation is when I actually realized how normalized it is. Till then, I had not. When I came here and I could like get on a bus without worrying if someone's going to like pinch me or tease me. I could go for a walk outside in the evening without worrying about if I'm going to get molested. I was like, wait a minute. So this is what safety feels like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what your body feels like when it's not hyper vigilant. So I kind of understood what a different world could be if we were not constantly, our bodies and our minds and our emotions were not constantly assailed. I think it's a more complicated, layered answer when it comes to male role models. Maybe the negative ones were higher in terms of saying don't be like this.
Why did you join Narika?
Well, Narika is the place I went to train. I loved the grassroots organizing that the organization does.
Mhm.
That is very precious to me. And honestly, we don't have the brightest minds engaging all the time because nobody sees it as a lucrative career path. Nobody thinks, oh, I'm going to be a domestic violence advocate when I'm studying. And yet there are like hundreds, thousands of us who are engaged in this work every day, and not seen or recognized. So I'm thankful that you took the time to talk to me about it.
Absolutely, because it seemed very interesting and also extremely meaningful.
Mhm.
Because when I was in India, I could never imagine. You work with the Indian and the South Asian diaspora. But back home, back in India, I could never imagine that in a country like the US, something like this could happen, would be
Yes.
perpetuated. And now that you're saying Narika is almost 32 years old and it is still going on, So once
Yeah.
I came here, and then I started to hear, like, stories from my neighbors or friends and all. And then I was like, no, it's a universal problem. And
Mhm.
just because this is the US, just because the laws are strong, the system is there, everything is in place, that doesn't mean that humans are going to change. So that was a big, big realization.
Power dynamics exist in every community. We are carrying our cultural beliefs, or whatever our patterns or blueprints are. We are carrying it over generationally and overseas. When we come in here, suddenly we are not changed.
Hmm.
And the systems here are also very far from perfect, right? Like, there are inequities even in the American system. There are so many imperfections here as well. There is injustice, there is discrimination. The system is no different than most other systems, and we have to learn to navigate it. So, I'll say that, the surprise you felt that, oh, over here there is domestic violence, that is the constant myth and the constant theme we hear. Like, the first time, when the minute I open my mouth, everybody says, either they'll say, oh, here in US, or they'll say, oh, here in our community, as if it's always somebody else's problem. Like, we don't have it, our community, our neighborhood doesn't have it, our state doesn't have it, our social strata doesn't have it, or our company doesn't. It's always, we don't have it, somebody else has it, somebody with a bigger problem has it.
Yeah. What constitutes domestic violence? Can you tell us a little bit about?
Yeah. So by definition, domestic violence is like an intentional pattern of coercive control that is exerted by one intimate partner over another partner, with an intent to cause harm and exert power and control over them. So it includes physical violence, of course, which is what everybody understands. Physical violence, somebody is hitting you, or, but it goes much beyond that. It includes mental violence, it includes emotional violence, it includes verbal, somebody's name calling you, somebody's minimizing you, somebody's not believing you, somebody constantly tells you all day you're not enough. So it includes those, and those are invisible things that happen, right? Like, you can see somebody's wound on a scar and you can believe them, but the emotional, the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, the verbal, that's very difficult. The mental violence is very difficult to actually, for people to even share about it, you know. And then there's also financial abuse, which accompanies pretty much, I would say, 99% of domestic violence that happens. So either somebody's forced to work, but they don't get their money, or they're not allowed to work, or they don't have access to their finances, they don't have access to their bank accounts. That is such a debilitating state to be in. And you're not allowed to build your savings and equity, which actually takes away your choice, your power to make choices regarding how you want to live your life. So financial abuse is huge. As immigrants in the community, there's also a lot of immigration abuse, and that's not understood. So, if you come on dependent visa here, you can't speak up against your abuser because you're going to lose your status. And if your children are, if your children are born here and are citizens, you're going to be separated from them. So withholding your legal papers, not giving you your, information on your status, not kind of processing your papers to get into the green card or to the citizenship, holding your children, or transnational abandonment, that is so huge, that where women are either left in this country or that country and separated from their family by the spouse. So that's actually such a growing problem. Transnational abandonment is huge.
Can you give a couple of examples of that?
Yes. So for example, somebody gets married and says, you're here in the US, and the spouse says, let's go back home, for a summer vacation, and you go. And then the woman's left behind there, and the spouse may come back with or without the child. And then the woman loses all contact with the husband. She has no idea how to get back, where to go. She doesn't have the money. She's basically abandoned in another country by the spouse. And this happens more often than we realize. Like in our case, it would be India.
Hmm.
If a client is from India, they're left back there. Or sometimes the spouse may, which is less often, but they may abandon them here. So they are left here and the spouse goes back. And they have no idea how to fend for themselves because they don't know how to navigate the systems here. And that's actually very confusing and very overwhelming, because you are now navigating laws in 2 countries, and you have no idea how the whole thing is going to work. So transnational abandonment is huge. That's also, and then there's tech abuse, which is really rising, and especially here in California, we are part of the Silicon Valley. So, tracking people's phones, putting cameras, tracking their vehicles without their consent, of course, trying to see where they're going all the time, things like that. So it's just so many types of, and then there's sexual abuse, there is reproductive abuse, there's maternal abuse, there's so many types of abuse. A big one is marital rape, because that's not even recognized in back home as something that's legal. So it takes a while for the survivor here to recognize that I don't have, if I am being touched or violated without my consent, then this is abuse that's happening, or if they find out, denying you your medicines when you're pregnant. So, this can be triggering for somebody listening. So I hope anybody hearing this, kind of takes care of them as I'm going through, but it happens in so many ways. And imagine somebody carrying all this experience and not being able to speak. And literally not being able to speak, supposing your English is limited, you don't know how to share it with somebody to express what's going on. Or your spouse has told you, if you tell people, no one's going to believe you. So how are they going to talk? You don't know who to trust in a new land. You don't know what the law is going to do. You don't know if you are going to get in trouble if you report it. You don't know where should I go for help. It's a huge problem. And survivors going through it, especially women, are really isolated. So our task is big. It's not just our organization that's invested in this work. There are other organizations in the Bay Area who we work with, very much in collaboration with. And everyone's kind of engaged in trying to break these cycles.
Can you tell us a couple of specific incidences where women came to you serious that you got to know?
So pretty much every person calling our helpline is obviously experiencing something serious, some kind of a crisis. We are held to very high levels of confidentiality. So I really cannot and should not ethically also share any story that points to anybody's specific example, but I can give overall patterns of what we see. We often see or get a call from somebody who has maybe just gotten married. It's an arranged marriage because you typically that's what happens back home oftentimes. So you've not really met the person you're going to be with. You have no idea. Sometimes they've not even seen them, and then you come here on a dependent visa because that's what your status is, and now you have to be with this person. Suddenly going from an environment where you were not really allowed to mix with the other gender or be very close, you're now in a house with this strange man. You have no idea how to navigate the systems around, including how, which grocery store do I get to even go for my basic needs? How do I go? Public transport here is not as as robust as India. So you really need to know how to drive or figure out bus systems, or you are kind of stranded here. So here you are in this home alone with this person, and then the red flag starts. So this person, typically we hear two things. Most of the times it's a slow escalation. So they got irritated over this. I had no idea what I had done, or they started questioning me why I'm calling home, or I shouldn't call home so often, or I shouldn't share things with my, or I'm not allowed to go out other than to the gym. I'm not allowed to go out here. I'm not allowed to go out there. So the control starts in different ways. That starts isolating the person at home and doesn't allow you to have contact even with your friends and family back home, because that's the only way somebody can establish power and control over you, right? That you become solely dependent on them. And then comes, it can develop into physical abuse, which is really very overwhelming. If the physical abuse starts very quickly and severely, there is a higher chance folks will call us because they are so, overwhelmed by what's happened. And many times it's the friends who are giving them the number, or some neighbor who's given them the number, or they see it in a library or a gym they went. And then they're calling us from a number that may or may not be safe, and then we are trying to help them. So the patterns vary, but there is this the things that stay steady in all of this is the isolation, the fact that they are not connected with their families, the fact that they're not being allowed to make friends, they don't know where to volunteer or go to get help. um, and it'll continue once that pattern sets. We've also talked to folks who are 22 years into their marriage, 25 years into their marriage, and they've become accustomed to just being like that. They, despite being in the country 25 years, they don't have any close friends. They've not worked anywhere. They really haven't established or developed their identity or pursued their potential. There's the constant fear they live in that we don't know when that person's going to explode for something that, is it's called walking on eggshells. I'm walking on eggshells all the time. I don't know what's going to. So it's a very oppressive environment. And every story has its unique patterns, and it's very heart-wrenching to see beautiful individuals not flowering into their potential because of this dynamic. I really want to add that the family and friends response when somebody shares something is going on is critical in a survivor feeling like they can get out of a situation, or feeling that they have to adjust. That word we have, na, adjust kar lo, that that's like the most poisonous message somebody can give. To there are instances when survivors say, we call back home and said, this is what's happening. And many times the answer is, adjust kar lo, tumne kya kiya, what did you do? Have a kid, everything will be okay. I'm not saying every family does it, but when that happens, then the survivor actually kind of says, okay, this is what I'm going to accept this, and I'm going to figure out how to navigate this and live with this. So family, friends, how we respond can change the trajectory of how a survivor feels about the violence that's happening. And that's so important, especially for families back home. I'll say, if you're losing contact with somebody who's been sent here, be concerned. Don't give up on them. Be concerned. Ask what's going on. Why are folks, why is somebody not talking to you anymore? What are they going through? And believe them when they say something is wrong. Don't ask ki tumne kya kiya. That's a terrible question to ask somebody who's telling you about a vulnerable situation. And think about, you're expected to have sexual, physical, intimate relations with this person who is new to you. And many times I have compassion for, both couples, because we don't really teach sex education. How do we assume that the man is going to know how to be in a healthy relationship, or will know what to do? It's just so much pressure, and there is no ramp up to it. There is no education to it. That is very traumatic for many women, because it may not be a healthy interaction, especially in an abusive relationship. It can be so overwhelming, and so many times survivors won't talk about it till very late, because it's full of shame, right? Like, we are taught to hide our bodies, we are taught to hide the sexual abuse, we are taught to hide, and we are taught to internalize it. And we are always, the victim blaming goes on. Tumne kya kiya is always the first. Why were you there? What clothes were you wearing? Who asked you to go there? You didn't take care of yourself. So I think it's very complicated, and every story, if you hear it, has has so much. You can see how the systemic cultural patterns have built up to just imprison somebody in that abusive situation right there. So I'm sorry, I just get passionate, so I talked a lot.
So you told us about the different instances and the different way the women are abused. I just wanted to know, what is the pressure that these men feel to behave like this? Is it something that is cultural, or what is it? Why do men, even in this age of different social media tools, I'm sure most of the men are educated. So why is it still that they behave like this?
I will again first caveat this to say, abusers can be from any gender. So men, women, LGBTQ. And that is a fact. That's a research fact. Very often, I will say, those who are inflicting harm have been harmed. So when somebody experiences abuse, there is a higher likelihood of them either being a survivor, becoming a victim, or becoming an abuser, because you are going to perpetuate what you learn unless you have some deeply pathological issue or some kind of a mental health issue and you're a sociopath or something like that. Most of the times, violence is a generationally learned behavior. We also always talk about how do we reach youth in their development age such that we don't form these blueprints where they are held to gender biases, where their emotions are not regulated, where culturally they are held to certain norms that don't allow them to be their full selves, whatever it might be. And if they are exposed to abuse, then they have normalized it and they are going to bring it back to whatever relationship that they are having. So why does somebody do it? Probably because they have seen it, they've learned it, they've experienced it, and they think it's normal, and that's their way of, a lot of narcissism exists. I'd like to add that there is a lot of tendency to blame things like substance abuse, alcohol, tension, job loss. Yes, those things exacerbate the problem if it exists, but we cannot excuse somebody who's doing harm by saying, "Oh, it's the alcohol." It's not the alcohol; it's the person. And they're choosing to take the alcohol, and then alcohol exacerbates already a bad situation. So this constant need to shift the blame away, and in fact place it on anybody other than who's doing harm is a problem. But then also, once you've placed the harm, placed accountability, how do we support somebody with passion, with compassion, and really look into transformative healing? That's also important.
Do you think some people also take advantage because we see so many things online on the internet? So sometimes, even though we are not victims, but we might start feeling as if we are victims, even with the slightest of slights. So once you follow some things for a long period of time, do you think it has the potential of influencing you, kind of little bit brainwashing you?
Do I think so? No. I think people should trust their red flags when, if you feel somebody is violating your space. I've never met a survivor who has been brainwashed into thinking they're a survivor. I've met survivors who've been brainwashed into thinking they are not survivors. It's true, there is a culture of cancellation, so it can be very overwhelming. I would rather be held accountable than have people suppress the question, is this right? What is happening? And we perpetuate something in silence. We should all feel it, because that's the most powerful reason women and survivors stay quiet, because we are told actually nothing is happening, it's in your head. Drama kar rahe ho, you're making this fear of overreaction stops us from stopping something in time when you could have stopped it. This "I never meant it" is a very powerful excuse for not looking into the actual impact you've made.
I sometimes feel that we have to be very sensitive to how others feel, be careful what we say. Our words matter a lot. But sometimes I feel we are going a little bit too far. I mean, I'm not talking about serious things like domestic violence and things like that. But generally speaking, when you make a little joke or you say something without even thinking, because while growing up, there were so many things that we said or that were said to us that almost meant nothing. And we kind of have that habit of speaking like that, or making a sarcastic remark without even thinking about it. I don't know whether we are taking it
No,
a
it's
bit
a
too
very
far.
fair. Actually, you know what? You've hit on a very, very powerful thing here, because the things we grew up with are our normal. So when we learn something that needs to be done differently, it fills us oftentimes with either shame or guilt. So one of the key things we are always talking about, even at Narika and all the prevention programs we do, is we have to come from a place of compassion for the person who's learning, whether it's ourselves or another person. So compassion is very, very important to acknowledge, yeah, we are not just cooking all this up. These were things that actually were, our norm. And also, the jokes you're talking about, I will say there are survivors everywhere. Survivors don't just happen to be in the Narika office or in the courtroom or in the if 1 in 4 women experience domestic violence and 1 in 7 men experience domestic violence in a room full of people, you can imagine how many survivors are there. When we use language or we make jokes, we have no idea how it's landing on somebody in the room. So something to think about. When we make a joke that is funny to us, but somebody comes and says it hurt me, a joke is a joke only as long as it doesn't represent somebody's truth. in a disrespectful way. The kernel, generally humor is humor because you are speaking something that's true, but you're making fun of it, right? So is it being heard by people who are able to take that truth, or is it being heard by people whose truth is being denied and it hurts them? So I know there is a lot. I know I'm a killjoy in many parties, because when some kind of joke starts, I'm like, nah, that doesn't seem like a great thing to say, especially when there are women in the room or there's a certain community in the room. And my friends, sometimes will be like, oh, we get it. And sometimes they'll be like, dude, you're a party pooper. And both are okay. But my job is to speak up.
Yeah, I was coming to that, that
Yeah.
after working in this field for more than 10 years, the antenna, but do you always have that kind of a thing where you can gauge, like, something is happening with somebody, or somebody is feeling uncomfortable, or something is not right? So is your mind always on automatically?
Yes, partially yes. I think not even without wanting to, I think you just see the patterns in front of you. I've learned for my self-care to not, because it's not even my place, to not immediately engage or see two and two and make four out of it. Because we always have to give credit, like credit of the doubt, right? Like, okay, maybe I'm seeing something, it may or may not be so. But is there a way for me to say, if you need support, we are there? I will try to do that. That's now almost like a lived experience. So I'm used to my phone ringing. I'm used to, getting texts. I feel very honored and grateful that people in the community think it's safe to, approach me or Narika for support. I will not say our support is perfect. We don't have perfect resources. We all don't always have perfect things to say. But yes, it's a it's a second layer on the skin now. And actually, when you get, I've heard it from new advocates too, when you enter that world, it's like you're seeing everything around you with a different lens. You are seeing a second world that's going on that nobody else is seeing around you. And you're watching it for little things and going, oh, that didn't feel right. That movement didn't, that sentence, that bruise, that you're always looking and hoping you're wrong.
Does that affect you in any way? Like doctors, they're so used to seeing the human anatomy that after a time they are desensitized. After having worked in this field for so many years, do you sometimes feel that you are becoming a little bit desensitized because there's so much you can do, and you cannot save the world, you cannot save everybody?
So I don't know how this is going to land as an answer, but I think being detached is part of the work. That's the only way we can do it in a sustained way. Having the humility to know I cannot resolve this problem and I may not have the perfect solution is the only way for me to serve without making it about myself. If I get caught up in, did I do the perfect thing? Did I find the perfect solution? Have I failed or succeeded? If I get caught in those things, or if advocates get caught in those things, then it becomes about you. It's no more about the person you're supporting. We are humans, we get engaged, but we try not to. I don't know how, but I feel like I am blessed with some kind of eternal spring of hope. Like, I thought myself that 5 years into this work, I won't be idealistic anymore. I will be jaded, I will be cynical. I don't know how, but it's not happened. Like, I don't feel cynical at every new idea. I feel like, yeah, this might be a really great resource. Let's do. Maybe I thank my mother, my grandmother. I thank the matriarchs. Um, Maybe I also thank my sister. I think anybody who's doing this work needs to have some solid support system to come back to. Who replenishes you and refills you back. I'm very blessed to have solid family who does it. My children, my sons, no matter how much fun they make of it, they support. My husband recognizes, validates the work. My sister, of course, my rock star. My the memory of my aunt and my. So I feel like I have enough, thankfully, and friends, amazing friends who replenish it. So I'm not drying up in my roots. And the colleagues I work with, oh my goodness, they are absolutely amazing. They all come from some walk, some experience, which is why they're here. And I think I'll be wrong if I don't also acknowledge the survivors themselves, our clients, uh, the amount of hope they give us, the amount of courage they give to us. Everybody always thinks we are giving to survivors. That there's no give and take. It's actually a very we are provided hope by someone who's through all that still smiling in a support group and saying how what can I bring to the support group, what food can I make and bring, or I have somebody asked me this morning, have you eaten your breakfast? I was on a call with a client and she's like, before you talk to me, have you eaten your breakfast? And I was like, I was blown away by the care, right? So yeah, I think we definitely become more cognizant of the blessings we have.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think even though we are individual warriors, if we don't have a support system, it gets really difficult.
Absolutely. I think community can be just like social media, community can be a real pain in the butt, but community can be a real asset in your toolbox if we build the right community. If we find the right people to stand by us, it can be such a powerful tool, comforting, strength building thing. But sit with the wrong folks and the same thing can really boomerang on you.
So let's talk about victims. What are the victims' biggest fears, insecurities, dilemmas, confusions? What are the things that hold them back?
There is the circle of abuse itself that is, first of all, holding somebody back. And then part of the abuse is somebody telling you daily that you are not enough, your decision making is not enough, you cannot speak well, you cannot speak properly, so you also doubt your ability to explain something to somebody. Many times, since they're narcissists, they are very charming. The abusers may be very charming in the community, may hold high positions, may be very powerful in terms of the connections they have, whether here or whether back home, where the survivor's family may come under threat. There's also the fear of, when I say something, I'm a nobody, or I may not be as well known, and this person's so well known, who's going to believe me that this charming person is so abusive behind doors? The voice of the abuser themselves, the fear for what's going to happen to them and their children who may be part of the abusive. So that's the first circle of fear and barriers, and the voice that the survivor themselves are internalizing, that's telling them they are not enough, they cannot speak, they're not worth somebody's time, they are not worth love or freedom. So you've internalized it, and there's also it's coming to you. After that, if you go outside of it, starts the communal, the familial circles, the systems, the larger systems come into play. So if you look at oppression, there are four eyes of oppression, right? There is the interpersonal oppression, then larger than that is the institutionalized oppression. So how are you treated if you're not married? How are you treated if you are married? How is marriage itself treated? How are the dynamics set up culturally in the marriage for who's supposed to be the leader, who's supposed to be, if you are without a husband, there is a lot of stigma for you. But if you're without a wife, there is no stigma for you. You are eligible. But if you're a woman who's for some reason separated or divorced, there is a whole identity crisis happening. So many resources are denied to you, right? What is your natal family telling you? So many times the messages, we have worked so hard to get you married, now you stay there. We've worked so hard to get you to the United States of America. We spent all our money. You stay there. We are under threat. Stay there. What are we going to tell the log kya kahenge? What are we going to tell the community? You stay there. So what is your family telling you? What are your friends telling you? Are you part of the perfect model minority as a South Asian who's living in these wonderful 3,000 square feet houses, where everybody's, backyard is perfect, fences are perfect, life looks perfect? How are you going to be the one to say, I have a problem? And actually the problem is not me, it's the person you all think is so great in the community. So that's there. And then there are the larger systems than that, the immigration system, the police system, the law enforcement, the criminalization of, pretty much it becomes the person who has been, the report is against, whether the case goes forward or not, is taken away from the survivor's hands, and it's in the hands of the state versus the person. So the district attorney is going to decide. Now, many of the survivors don't want their partners to be criminalized for various reasons. They don't want there to be that kind of negotiation happening. So there are so many barriers, starting from that one, interpersonal to institutionalized, and then there's the ideological. People don't even, there's so many folks who will not even believe that domestic violence happens, that who actually normalize domestic violence, who say that is how it has always been. Now what is the problem? If you agar do thappad kha liya to kya problem hai? There are people I have heard say, मारता है दो हफ्ते, एक महीना में दो बार तुम मार खा लो, but the trade off is that you're living in a good house, in a good community, in a, so there are so many layers and layers. And then if you do decide, I'm going to go through all of these and I'm going to leave, most people think leaving is the solution, but that's not the solution always. There are many ways to resolve domestic violence. Some people choose to stay in the relationship but try to build better boundaries and safety. So supposing we go into the narrative of their leaving, whatever leaving the relationship looks like, then there's co-parenting. You still have a child you may be sharing with the person. There are legal cases that carry on for years and years. You may not have built your financial, economic security to know where you're going to go, how you're going to get a job. You are at imminent risk of homelessness the minute you say, because people always imagine the woman leaving. The person who's causing the domestic violence is probably the one with the money who owns the house, who is not going to leave the house unless, you get a court order if you choose to go and fight all those battles. So if you look at it, getting out of that relationship has just so many layers of barriers, stigmas, fears, and actual fears of for your safety. We all know that the time when the survivors trying to leave a relationship is the most dangerous time for them. That's when all the violence escalates quite a bit, because the person's losing power and control over you. That's a very scary time for the survivor. And if systems and all of us don't step up, they can be harmed. So when we are asking survivors, why are you not leaving the situation? Or, so many times I've heard folks say, if I was in her situation, but the truth is you're not. The truth is you have no idea what the person's navigating. Actually, even if you're a survivor, you don't know what another survivor is navigating. But if you're not experiencing domestic violence, likely you have no idea what the person. So to at least have the humility to say, I will believe you. I'm going to take my lead from you on how you need support. Maybe that helps a little bit, but it takes almost 10 plus years for a survivor to rebuild. Think of financial abuse, by the way, also many times involves credit fraud. So the survivors build years rebuilding their credit history, or building their credit history, or shaking off fake accounts that they had no idea were opened in there. So there's just so many complications. Like, can you imagine having to navigate that along with your health, along with your safety, along with people telling you you're so stupid to do it?
I know. Oh my God, I can't even think about it. And that reminds me of a movie that I saw when I was younger, Sleeping with the Enemy.
Mhm.
That was such a scary movie, and that left a deep imprint on my mind.
Yeah, and
I,
people feel like you're educated. What does that have to do with? It's got nothing. Like, domestic violence is equally prevalent no matter which strata of community you go to.
so, is it mostly consultations that you do with victims, or are there different things that you provide, like jobs, safe houses? Oh, how does it all work out?
There's a whole slew of services, and thank you for asking that, because that's important information to get out there. Narika, first of all, we offer a confidential helpline that runs 12 hours weekly. So to 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., it's answered live by trained advocates who are answering the helpline. And I want to stress that it's confidential, because one of the big fears that survivors always have is who's going to know about this. And I want to assure you that without, we are held by federal laws to standards of confidentiality that we have to adhere to. We have advocates who speak a variety of South Asian languages, so that helps somebody, tell their story in their own words. We also offer case management, which is longer term management on, how are you going to safety plan? What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? How do we help you connect with resources you need? So there's case management. There's also a lot of mental health support we offer. So we offer support groups, psychotherapy, psychoeducational groups, art groups, different modalities of healing and support that we offer through our programs. We give individual referrals to therapy. We have our own transitional home that can provide longer term support. We also provide emergency shelter and safe nights. So if somebody's fleeing, they need to go somewhere, resources allowing, we have anywhere from 3 nights to 2 weeks that we are able to support somebody till they find shelter, along with emergency transportation, food. And of course, we give a lot of legal support. Like that's the main thing every survivor needs right away is, what are my rights? Am I filing for a restraining order? How do I get to the courts? How do I make a police report if they're choosing to? Not everybody does. So yeah, there's a variety of services we have to offer, and none of them are perfect. And that's why we have to work in collaboration with a lot of sister agencies to get the resources that a survivor needs to be really able to navigate their situation, whichever way they want, whether they're leaving, they're staying, they're trying to make something safe, they're making a longer term plan, whatever it is that they're doing. I will say that we are very survivor centered, in that whatever the survivor is choosing, because they know the relationship best and they know how the abuser is going to respond. So we will help always safety plan to say, how are you going to, do you need papers processed? Is there a formal processing agency you can use? Or if you're going to engage in something, how are you going to keep yourself safe? Is it moving out of the house? Is it using professional services? Is it de-escalating the situation when you're in it? We do not directly get involved in the interaction ever. That's outside of the purview of what we do. Our role is to provide support and safety and care to the survivor. And then we do not engage. And we are not a mobile rapid response team, so we are not going to show up at situations or intervene. That is not our role. Our role stays with working with the survivor.
How much does the local police and the local government help you and support you and the victim?
I'll say the policies are there. They're very far from perfect. We have received support from. I mean, everybody is wanting to see this go away. Are the responses perfect? No. Are people working on having more trauma-informed, culturally responsive? Yes. Is the government response perfect? No. Is the police response perfect? No. There's so much to be done there in terms of how do we respond in the community. But are we invested in creating networks of care with all providers? Absolutely. Because the survivor needs every single entity. Policies are needed, processes are needed, first responders are needed, safety is needed. We are dealing with violent environments. So we definitely do not hold any illusion that we can operate in isolation, and we do reach out to form collaborations as needed with any agency, whether our sister agencies, community-based agencies, law enforcement, government. I do want to dispel the myth that the only way to get help is to go through like a police report or go to the court. There are many ways to get support just from community organizations. If you don't want to report something, you don't have to report something. It's always a choice. You can totally come and get support from organizations like Narika without formally reporting anything to a law enforcement. We will hold confidentiality. So that is very important for survivors to know. And there's a misconception that if you come to us, then we are going to make you report. We don't have any agenda. Our agenda is to support you. What will help you feel fulfilled, safe, and secure, and growing in your potential? That's our agenda.
Does the organization ever get threatened, or do you, as the executive director, have ever gotten threatened by anybody?
No, maybe I'm not doing my work right. The fear is always there. We do take a lot of safety protocols. Like we make sure we do as much as possible, support confidentiality, privacy, safety of our advocates. I'm definitely out there as the face of the organization. When I was a new advocate, I was very worried about it, by the way. I used to be like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen if someone comes after me?
Yeah.
We've had people call up our organization and kind of try to get information out of us or information on some clients, and we are trained on how to respond to that. We don't respond. Our advocates are trained to handle that. But yeah, I have to say, and maybe I'm jinxing it right now, to say that I have not been threatened. Um, the possibility exists, but also I feel like if we get scared by that, then what hope is there for those who are under threat every day? With all the resources I have and the support I have and the community I have, like my neighbors, everybody knows the work I do, and they're always so supportive. If me with all this get scared that I will get threatened and don't do the work, then how is that helpful to a survivor? So that's what I tell myself whenever I wonder, you know is this today the day that I'm going to
Because a pharmacist friend of mine told me a couple of stories about, especially at night, when she was not filling the opioid prescription for a couple of people, junkies. They followed her to the car. They kept waiting outside the pharmacy. So
Yes.
yeah, she used to call her husband or somebody to come over and pick her up.
The professions you think are, mild, like pharmacist or someone, they are actually on the front lines in so many ways. I have so much respect actually for people who are really serving the community directly.
How do you get your funding?
A combination of the kindness from the community. So we have individual donors, foundations. We also get state level funding. Of course, there's a huge cut coming. I don't know if you've seen it. There is a huge federal cut coming to funding that all nonprofits are very worried about right now. But it's government funding, government grants, state grants, local community grants, and individual donors and founders. So it's a combination. It takes everything, because as a nonprofit, I will say people want to help, they want to be noble, but they don't want to think about the fact that we need money. Like survivors need money. Everybody needs money to survive. As a
Yeah.
nonprofit, we need money because we don't charge for any service that we give. Everything is free. So raising money is a huge thing. And I wish, how our community gives to many causes that feel closer to their hearts. I wish they would consider, institutions like organizations like us who are, doing the work that feels a lot of stigma and silence. I wish they would give with more open hearts and trust us also, and trust the survivors also. Um, because money is power, right? It's a tool. So, and we have some amazing volunteers. Like I will say, I don't want to discount the help we get in kind from our community. The women in our community who to come to a volunteer are some of the fiercest. I'm speaking here today. I wish, everybody's story could be there. They're amazing, compassionate, fierce, fearless almost. Because they're on the helplines. Yeah.
Is Narca only present in California, or does it have branches all over the country, or is it associated with any other organization?
No, we're not associated with any other organization. We are only in California. In fact, we are mostly serving the Alameda County, Contra Costa County in the Bay Area. Of course, we'll serve anybody who calls us, and parts of the South County as well. So we're not nationally present. Um, would be amazing if someday we are, but even more amazing if we disappear and we are not needed.
I know. So, so any of our listeners, or anybody who gets to know about Narika, or anybody who is in a situation where they need help of an organization like Narika, what can they do?
Anybody who calls us a helpline will receive help. If someone says, I'm a survivor, we believe you and we will help you. LGBTQ folks call our helpline. Sometimes men call our helpline. We will help the best we can, and then we will network to find the right resource for you. So nobody, if you're a survivor of domestic violence, well, I would like to say nobody is refused. If we don't have the expertise, it's a human trafficking survivor, or it's a, family violence survivor, or a sexual assault, we will still at least try to connect you with the right resource.
How can they contact or how can they find out about their local organization? I mean, of course, there's Google, there's everything,
Yeah.
but how do they know that it is authentic? They're going to take care of them. They are legitimate and they are compassionate.
I will say this, if you're looking for support, there is always support. It may be at the grocery store, it may be at the library, it may be that one friend you meet at the gym. And you don't have to do this alone. If you speak out to somebody, somebody's going to believe you. People know this exists, people are working for it. So I was constantly surprised by how many resources are available to them because they've been told there's no resource for you. And that's not true. So find that one person who you trust. Be careful in how you make the call because if your phone is tracked or if your computer is tracked, that might give a heads up to the person who's causing you harm, and that might escalate the situation for you. So maybe take a friend's support to make the call, or call from a safe phone at a safe time, at a time when you can talk peacefully. I think there are many ways for people to get support. I've seen people get support from their neighbors for years who have kept them safe. So trust your instinct. Even though you've been told again and again that your instinct is not worth trusting, trust your instinct. Help can come in many different ways. And for sure, reach out if you get a chance because people will believe you. There are people waiting here to support, and you will be believed by people in the community.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was lovely talking to you, and it's amazing what you're doing and what Narika is doing. And people have that stigma, and people have different kinds of conditioning and programming. And I hope there are many more organizations like you that open up. As you're saying, I mean, it would be fantastic
Yes.
if you never
Yes.
existed.
Yes.
But
Yes.
let's
Yeah.
hope for the best. I don't know how things are going to change, how people are going to change, and how the narcissism, the abuse, the trauma, and I think childhood is a very, very important part of every human's
Yeah.
development. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that's going to happen, but I really hope it does
Yeah.
because it's really going to change the world for the better.
I agree. I have a lot of faith in the youth. They have so much knowledge on their hands. I have a lot of faith in I'm not saying that it's their burden. I don't want to burden them, but I have a lot of faith in our youth. And I think things are changing. There are folks who are speaking up. Um, if I think change will come with every household, So if everybody looks at themselves in the mirror and says, I'm the change, then change will come. So I'm hopeful. I'm the forever forever idealist.